Come on now, get up, dance, smile, rejoice, and be glad, because what we thought was the end was only the beginning. Our story is not done and it's not over, because we have taken back the pen and we are rewriting our story. So let's go ahead on, celebrate, dance, shout, rejoice, be glad, do whatever it is that you want to do that makes you feel good on today. Because again, what was thought, what was the end, was only the beginning. Can't afford another abortion. For many years, I've allowed people's opinions and actions to force me into having abortions. External validation, the psychological phenomenon by which individuals seek approval and recognition from others to affirm their value, constitutes a significant aspect of human experience, deeply intertwined with our emotional and psychological development. On my journey, the desire for external validation arose in early childhood, a longing for the recognition that paralleled my struggle with self-esteem and self-acceptance. Living in a saturated environment of expectations, I found myself in a constant search for family validation, peer validation, and social norms, with each compliment seen momentarily to fill a void. But these fleeting moments of approval disproportionately overshadowed my innate sense of value, distorted my perception of myself. The compulsion of seeking validation extended into my relationships, where I often neglected my own needs and desires in favor of appeasing others. This behavior was rooted in an internal dialogue that constantly questioned my dignity. Was I enough if others didn't recognize me as such? While sailing in these initial experiences, it became increasingly evident that my self-esteem was tied to external opinions, which illustrated a cycle of dependence. Isolation and inadequacy appeared at times when recognition deluded me. I fought with the paradox of seeking connection, but feeling deeply disconnected. Subsequently, my search for external validation led to profound implications of my well-being, extending beyond mere emotional anguish. The effort to meet relentless social and spiritual expectations usually resulted in physical manifestations. These manifestations showed itself as stress, anxiety, insomnia, fatigue, and somatic symptoms became routine mates of my life. The pressure to present an acceptable facade kept me trapped in a self-sabotage cycle. As I saw myself aborting prematurely goals, dreams, aspirations, gifts, talent, for fear of not being perceived as worthy of others. This internal conflict has grown in what I can describe as spiritual abortions. The abandonment of personal aspirations and the neglect of my inner self in favor of social and spiritual acceptance. Gradually, I recognized my pursuit of external validation not only made my growth difficult, but it also turned me away from the path of authenticity, reducing my ability to true self-acceptance and spiritual fulfillment. These experiments have illuminated the harmful emotion reasons behind this search and their chilling implications of my overall health. In my search for external validation, I often found myself in a cycle of emotional turbulence, characterized by deep feelings of inadequacy, anxiety, and depression. This research, initially cloaked in the disguise of ambition and self-improvement, has gradually explained itself in an exhaustive effect that seriously undermines my emotional well-being. The fear of judgment by friends, family, and the church have become a driving force, which has led me to sacrifice my mental health for the maintenance of an impressive servant. While I paid countless hours in the church, the joy of serving had turned into an obligation full of pressure. The repercussions of this pursuit were not limited to my spiritual life, but also permeated my natural relationships. I found myself gravitating towards people who echoed my insecurities, forming connections that were more based on mutual validation than true compatibility. And this is called trauma bonding. This commitment with behaviors looking for validations eventually made me feel isolated and unworthy. Although I was physically present, I felt emotionally drifting as if I were simply a reflection of someone else's ideals rather than an authentic individual. The emotional conflict found its outlet in episodes of depression, in which the weight of the suppressed identity worsened and in deep sense of despair. The initial excitement of contributing to a noble cause such as serving in the church with my whole heart was soon overshadowed by the anxiety as I worried how my efforts would be perceived by others. The joy of serving evaporated, replaced by a burdensome fixation on what others would think or say. These experiences clarify a worrying trajectory, fueled by a persuasive need for external validation. The models of behavior that developed in response to these dynamics not only have eroded my confidence in myself, but also favored an environment in which self-criticism is thrown without control. Each cycle of validation research followed by disappointment has sculpted a paranomia of emotional that has prevented my general sense of myself. I realized I had created an ongoing struggle between who I was and who I thought I had to be. The end of the spiritual abortions of the lost aspirations and the dissatisfied potential. The weight of these emotions was profound, influencing the choices I made and the relationships I formed, and acting as a moving reminder of the innate value of self-acceptance. Accepting beyond the influence of external perceptions. The search for external validation has often manifested itself in my life as a disturbing, deep, and obscuring of my innate values and belief. Initially, this chase seemed gentle, an attempt to navigate in social landscapes in which acceptance seems equivalent to happiness. However, while I deepened the external landscape, I started to recognize its corrosive impact on my spiritual identity. The moments of realization in which I compromised my authentic self for reasons of belonging were, perhaps, the most significant spiritual abortions of my life. These events have crystallized my understanding that the charm of acceptance, although immediately rewarding, had a profound cost. Each act of abandoning my passions, my purpose, my mission, my goal, my gifts, my talents, the same threats that intertwine my identity served only to deepen the abyss between my external person and my internal truth. It was through this commitment to the surface validation that I experienced spiritual abortions. in which the act of conforming to social and spiritual churchy expectations turned off the vibrant light of my unique character. Through introspection, I came to recognize the paradox of the search of validation. In pursuing the acceptance of others, I often gave up the acceptance of myself. This identity dialect left me struggling with disillusionment and anxiety, illuminating the fundamental importance of reconciling external perceptions of my innate values. The distinctive moments on my journey illuminated the need to honor my passions and beliefs as precious facets of my spiritual being, rather than allowing them to be obscured by the fickle shadows of the approval of society or church folks or leaders or pastors and members alike. While I think about my trip to self-acceptance, it becomes more and more obvious that my pursuit of external validation was a complex interaction of personal insecurity and a deep need for approval from others. This quest, although often masked in the form of ambition and aspiration, finally led to experiences that I now call my spiritual abortions. These are the moments when I inadvertently sacrifice part of my real self in exchange for superficial connections and social approval or church approval or religious approval. Whenever I sought the validation of the outside of myself, I decreased my sense of value, moving my energy away from nourishing my innate values and passions. The process of detangling my identity from expectations of others was as instructive as it was difficult. I recognized the harmful models formed when I measured my value against those around me, leading to anxiety and disillusionment. Innumerable hours spent chasing praise and recognition resulted in physical experiences that reflect my emotional disorders, characterized by moments neglecting my well-being at the service of others. Getting into this cycle has exhausted not only my energy, but also my mind, as I find myself constantly in contradiction with my authentic self. To embrace an evolution towards self-validation required a courageous reassessment not only of my motivations, but also my beliefs on what it means to be worthy of love and acceptance. By learning to detach my self-esteem from external sources, I embarked on a personal growth trip rooted in self-exploration. I started to deepen the understanding of the unisons of self-esteem and acceptance. Discovering the validation should first come from interior. This internal validation allowed me to resist the inevitable fluctuations of external opinions and social pressures. The importance of this change is multi-layered. First, I cultivated a deep and lasting feeling of confidence, which is not influenced by external judgments. I learned to celebrate my achievements, regardless of their big or small, as a valid expression of my capabilities and my desires, not as a means of arousing approval from others. Secondly, this internal realignment has triggered compassion and empathy in me, equating me that everyone's journey is unique and deserves respect. I celebrate the diversity of experiences that exists. In the end, I understand that the most significant and most transformative validation are those that resonate within the depths of my existence. This journey to self-acceptance has enlightened the path to real fulfillment and personal reliance. I learned that self-esteem is not only a concept, but a practice that requires continuous commitment and reflection. By granting myself the same grace and the same understanding that I formerly searched for in others, I allowed myself to flourish, kissing the dynamic pastry of what I am rather than complying with a story dictated from the outside. I have taken the pen back and began to rewrite my story. In this season, I will not allow anything or anyone to put me in a place to abort what God has given me. In this season, I cannot afford another abortion. In this season, you cannot afford another abortion. But we will push through and deliver what God has birthed in us. For I and we will wait upon the Lord. He shall renew our strength. We shall mount up with wings as eagles. We shall run and not be weary. We shall walk and not faint. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Rewriting My Story. If you could be so kind to follow, I'm on all podcast platforms. Hit that follow button, leave a comment, leave some encouraging words. You can even leave a discussion topic that you would like for me to cover. All right, thank you again for your support. It means so much to me.